What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Adelia here with my buddy Josh. This was the Schmoedown, our Schmoedown retrospective series. We are pre-recording this episode, and we're going to talk tonight about the Innergeekdom division as a whole. But we can't do this alone, no matter how much Josh and I could probably talk about this division on our own. We have a special guest tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show, Chris Ingle.
Hello.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Chris in his library, it looks like.
I'd like it to be like a DVD or like Blu-ray library, but this is as close as it gets.
Yeah, that would be nice. All right, so how are you doing tonight, Chris?
I'm so glad you asked me on. I'm feeling great and feeling a little nostalgic for the Innergeekdom division. I actually watched a couple matches today, and I can't wait to talk a little bit about this gem in the Schmoedown family.
Nice. Well, we can't wait to talk about it either. Chris came up with the idea for this episode, so thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. The Innergeekdom division started back in 2016 at Schmoedown Spectacular with a fatal five-way and Robert Burnett winning to become the first Innergeekdom champion, but it evolved into something that was pretty incredible as the Schmoedown went on. It was my favorite division of the Schmoedown. I don't know if it was anybody else's, but Josh, how did you feel about the Innergeekdom division?
Absolutely, and just to add on to that, it was mine as well. I in the end, and it didn't start off that way, but the more the division grew, the more it came to be my favorite, and it had so many competitors that really shaped not just the Innergeekdom division, but the Schmoedown itself. And as we get into the history of it, I think the qualities of it, the questions, because it's unlike. When I think about Innergeekdom, it's the middle between the deepness of Star Wars and the I don't want to say non-deepness, but like compared to Innergeekdom and Star Wars, the questions for singles and teams are very straightforward, and it was this very nice middle ground where it was such a place to show off your knowledge and passion for the things you love and get these like details that did not seem impossible to get, but was like, oh geez, you know that. And the stars in the Innergeekdom rivaled the stars of any other division by far.
Yeah, Chris, what about you?
It's such a joy. It was always my favorite thing to watch when the Schmoedown would come around, because I always felt like I was more equipped to answer those questions. Those were the kinds of movies I turned to first. And I love my Godfather and my Forrest Gump and my Deer Hunter. I love those, don't get me wrong, but let's talk about Batman 89. Let's talk about Indiana Jones. Let's Star Trek movies. Like, that's my joy. That's my bread and butter. So to have an entire division dedicated to that level of nerddom, and for it to be as popular as it was, and yet challenging, was so much fun. In fact, I don't know if you remember, Adelia, when we went to the spectacular, one of the last live spectaculars, I had on the front row, and there's images of me with my whiteboard, especially during Innergeekdom, trying to answer the questions. That was the fun of it. That was the joy of being able to do it. And not because I ever wanted to compete, but just because I wanted to test what I knew about the things I love.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the kind of movies that I gravitate towards because not that other movies aren't good, because they are, but these are the kind of movies that I gravitate towards. I've always been a geek. And so when they started Innergeekdom, it was a division that I more often than not would get the answers correct in. Now, I'm not great at movie trivia, and I still haven't seen lots of things, but Innergeekdom was one of those divisions where I would get them right more often than not. Plus, they had categories like Middle Earth, my favorite thing in the world, and Harry Potter, MCU, all of this stuff. Star Wars, of course, having its own division. But the Star Wars questions in Innergeekdom, I could answer more often than I could answer the Star Wars questions in the Star Wars division, because those left, that category in its own division got way harder than the Star Wars questions in the Innergeekdom division ever was. This is one of the the divisions that I also enjoyed watching in the First Class League. They didn't have a ton of Innergeekdom matches in the First Class League, but they did have some ones and questions there that I could answer too, and that's why I enjoyed this division more than probably any of the others. Um, Plus, like I loved Rachel Cushing and Mara Kanopik, and this is one of the first divisions to have a female champion in it. In fact, the first division to have a solo female champion. We had, of course, the tag champions with Shire Wolves, but let's talk about the questions in the Schmoedown as a whole, because the questions evolved definitely throughout the course of the show. The early wheel categories in this division were pretty broad. The questions weren't very deep, but then you get to the end of the Schmoedown and it's very deep cut specificity with the questions. Chris, what did you think about the questions in the Schmoedown as a question writer yourself for many of the competitors who helped train?
I saw that it got harder and harder and harder to create questions, because as what you're dealing with here is when you have singles, your mind as it is a lot broader. It's a lot bigger. So you don't have to dig as deep to be able to get something of quality. But with Innergeekdom, when especially starting out, we only had like 10 to 12 categories, I think. It was really small starting out. You're digging into it and you're digging faster and faster because your mind is not as big. And so the questions got harder faster. And we saw this in Star Wars. Same thing. One niche thing, you got to dig. And now you're digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper in order to make it more in order to make it challenging. So it was really hard. I loved watching it to start out because I felt like I could do this. I felt like I could play this. It was great. But as time went along, you're going, wow, wait, what? And you're like, where are they digging these out of? Where are you getting these out of? And some people complain about that. Star Wars Division, I'm looking at you. I've always said that it was too deep. Like, did they say that name in the movie? Really? No, it was mentioned on like minute 4 of the credits.
They started like using stuff from like the books that they put out to like broaden the stuff. The Star Wars Division they had to. It's what happens when there's only like 9 movies, and most of the time that division existed, there was less than 9 movies. Right.
It's why I never understood why they didn't expand to like TV shows at the very least.
They should have expanded for the TV shows.
I know they talked about it, but
they did in the First Class League. They expanded to include some of the TV shows in the First Class League.
If I remember correctly, sorry to interrupt. If I remember correctly, there was a lot of pushback from Star Wars players. Especially I think Andrew DeMolanto, if I remember correctly, was a huge proponent of not adding the TV shows. If I remember correctly.
I remember Laura Kelly saying on our Schmoedown Crackdown episode after Collision once that she would watch the TV shows for the show if she had to, but she was not going to answer any questions about Star Wars Resistance because she just couldn't get into it and stuff like that. So I think there was a lot of pushback from a lot of competitors about the actual amount of like studying you would have to do with like 7 seasons of the Clone Wars and Rebels and all of that stuff that they wanted to add. So.
I totally understand that as a geek person, I get that. Like, I use Star Trek as my example. There are 13 films. Now there's 14 films, but there are films. And I know a ton about the TV series all the time. But I can't be expected to be able to use that knowledge to help me with the movies. Now, occasionally that helped. Occasionally, like when I would train or things like that, sometimes there were connections, but I can't expect other players to do that. The point is, as a question writer, you had to start digging deeper. You had to go for it, and we were reaching a point where it was getting more challenging. Now, one of the good things I love is they started to again expand the mind. So you didn't have to dig as deep. We started looking at graphic novels. We were looking at other things stretching out beyond the normal geekdom that you expected. Power Rangers was in there at one point, and I can go on and on and
Indiana
on.
Jones was one
Yeah,
that
I
came
think
that
you
out.
got
became a
Pirates
Yeah.
of the
pulp.
Caribbean
Yeah, Pirates
at
of the
one point.
Caribbean, pulp
Jurassic
films,
Park.
Jurassic. Oh, adding. Oh, Jurassic. I'll be honest. If it's not the first film, I lose it.
Yeah.
I've seen that one a million times, but if I have to watch Jurassic Park 3 one more time, I will gag. But that being said, they got smart and they expanded the mind. I also think sometimes they were expanding it a little too far. Like we're stretching it a little further than it needed to be. But unfortunately, as things have happened, over the years and Schmoedown stopping, we didn't get to really see what the fruits of that would have been and how
Yeah.
far that would have gone. But it
Yeah.
was starting. It was starting. I appreciated expanding, but I was worried it was going to expand too fast. And there were too many things. And as I was writing questions, there were movies that I had never seen, which I had no idea were Innergeekdom, like Snowpiercer. I had no idea. I'd never seen it, never heard of it. So that was a whole new thing I needed to watch. And the Watchmen series. Now I know that was, but that wasn't originally in it. Then it was. Then the point is it was expanding and it was growing, and you had to keep up in that kind of a league to be able to do that. So a lot of people loved it, a lot of people enjoyed it, and I am very happy that nonetheless in the end, despite the fact that maybe I didn't go a little further down the mine than I should have, it was still challenging, it was enjoyable, and I don't think there really was anyone who was like, no, that shouldn't be in there. No, I think overall it was very welcome.
Yes. I agree.
Absolutely. And I'll just say that like I kind of really really liked the expansion for a lot of reasons. I think for the question difficulty, they did a very good job of like straggling the line given the limited categories. And I think a very interesting cause and effect of the expansion is the strategy going into it. I think there were some inner geekdom players who's like, am I going to request Middle Earth and get these like Middle Earth questions after 5 years, or do I request a new category that's going to have maybe newer questions and not delve as deep? I think
Yeah.
some you could see some competitors being like, do I stick on this new category which might have easier questions, or do I maybe try and spin for my strength, but my strength is Middle Earth and I we've answered so many Middle Earth questions that it might go super super deep.
It, it,
You could
it,
see the clear difference between the beginning categories versus the newer categories added for sure.
it was almost better to go for categories that had a broader base, because again it's the mind. You're not having to dig as deep when you've got Star Trek had 13 movies compared to what was it, only 5 at the time for Indiana Jones. I
Absolutely, and
think
that
they
was
were up to
another thing
5.
that was another thing competitors did. Is like how many movies are in the series. It's like if there were more movies, maybe the questions will be more broader. If it was very specific, where there were a little amount of movies, you have to know those 5 movies, like every single minute detail. And that was a very interesting strategic thing for the competitors to kind of balance
Mm-hmm.
and kind of see in real time, go through back and forth. And what I'll say about the expansion, I never got a problem with it. I think a lot of people like I think there was a minority that was like, "Oh, we're going too far, and we're losing the core things of middle." Or I was an MCU person; that was my category. We're losing the true geekdom of MCU Middle Earth. The way I kind of view it is like, as long as to me, the Inner Geekdom was all about passion. It was celebrating these franchises or movies that we were extremely passionate about to the point where we watched it 7 or 8 times despite it being the same movie, noticing every little detail, noticing like, oh, what is this random background character's name? Oh, I love this about this movie. Oh, this actor who is like only has 1 or 2 lines, and so oh, I know this person's name because I love this specific 1 or 2 line. If you can conceivably think of maybe 20 to 30 people who love that category to that degree, I think it's okay to be an inner geekdom. If we're getting kind of like, well, yeah, I can see 1 or 2 people, but like to me, you had to have some sort of community around the category that truly loved that category to the point where they will watch it 10 to 15 times. There are details to geek out about. There are stuff that people will go over and over and over and think about. And so like MCU Middle Earth was definitely that for sure. And I think a lot of the categories they added, there were people who were 100% in that way, and that's why I was okay with the category expansion. The question is when you get to these movies that are more cult classics that people really like, and a lot of people really like, but did they like it to that? Was there a? I mean, this is arbitrary, so it's not a great, and that's probably why a lot of people didn't mind expansion because you could imagine for a lot of these movies a very dedicated fan base that would delve deep into those movies and answer these trivia questions and call it a strength.
I think there was a switch, a changing point, definitely. I know, I think it was the start of the expansion. I remember when there was a difference between DC films and DCEU films. Same with
Yes.
Marvel films versus MCU
MCU.
films. As time went along, they started melding more together. And of course, now we see today that it's all melded together anyway. you
Yeah.
know, um, but it creates those changes and those adjustments, and then now you're like, okay, it's a double-edged sword because all right, now I could be any Marvel film, could be anything, but then you're like, oh shoot, it could be anything, and it adds to the challenge and the difficulty of it. But again, it actually broadens your mind. Again, I'm going to use this mining thing because that's what this felt like all the time. Was we're going back in the mine, and what are you going to come up with? Is it going to be a diamond? Is it going to be a piece of coal? What is it? I never felt like, oh man, we've talked about this question before. Why are we doing this again? Why are we going back? No, I always felt like there was something new, and the change ups that would happen not only made it more difficult, but were allowing us to really have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that as the questions started to evolve and get deeper into these categories as well, you could sort of like start to separate out the competitors who really studied a lot and the ones who just were going based off the knowledge that they had. Josh is back. So like for me, there's kind of like three eras to the Inner Geekdom division. There's the first era, which is like the personalities, like, oh, I'm a geek, I'm a nerd, I know this stuff, and that's when the questions were first, you know, pretty easy. And then you have the 2018 tournament class, which was involved like Rachel and Mike and Mara Knopic and a bunch of other competitors that was the first tournament that we got in Inner Geekdom, which I think is really was really good. And it was when the moment IG had an actual roster of people to draw from instead of just the same like fatal 5 ways. Here's a fatal 4 way in Inner Geekdom. We actually got some one-on-one Inner Geekdom matches um, consistently after that. And then there's the faction era where you had your, it started before the faction era obviously, but you had your Smets, your Robert Parkers, Chance came into IG and did very well. And these are players who studied meticulously this stuff. So what do you think, Chris, about the three eras of players that we kind of got in the Schmoedown Inner Geekdom?
It only got more challenging. It only got more difficult. When
Yeah.
you look at the beginning, when you look at Robert Meyer Burnett, you look at Jason Inman, who are knowledgeable in of their rights.
Hector Navarro as
Hector,
well.
yeah, competing, and I say today, but
Yeah.
competing today would be near impossible. Near impossible.
I mean, we kind of saw that where Hector had come in, he'd won the belt off Robert Meyer Burnett. He went away for a while, and he came back and played Adam Lavick, and Adam Lavick wiped the floor with him because Hector didn't study. Hector came in just relying on his knowledge, and by that point, you had to study. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely something that really happened.
Yep. And but that I think adds again to the joy of it. Like you never knew who was going to come up and what was going to happen. Like I never would have expected Chandru to be the threat that he was.
Me
Never,
either.
not starting out, I wouldn't have. Now, later we saw what he could do.
Mhm.
You know, Parker. I mean, well, I knew Parker from the lower leagues before, so I knew how good he could be. But still, same thing when you look on the screen and what we've got here in the Schmoedown, you wouldn't have guessed that right away. You wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Smets doesn't look like an Innergeekdom guy in any way. He really looks like he belongs in the WWE. I got to be honest, even till today. You wouldn't have expected that. So you never knew what you were going to get. And with everything growing and everything expanding, and what's really hard is these types of films are what are heavily in the zeitgeist of the world right now. And it still is that way. So if the Schmoedown was still going on today, could you imagine the difficulty of this expansion from here? Where we would be now compared to then? I'm sure there'd be more categories added and other types of films. And now we're going to talk about streaming, and maybe the TV shows would have been included. And I don't know, but it just would have continued to grow and continue to expand, and you would have had to work harder. So it was a lot simpler, a lot easier in the early days. And that's a joy. That's great. But I will be honest, those matches now come off as a little bit boring. Not because we know them, but because the level is so difficult, or it's not difficult. We see that in early Schmoedown with singles and teams. They were easy questions. They very much were.
Much easier than they were by the end, at the very least.
So much so. So I'm really glad where we got into, but those middle years with Rachel and Mara and Mike, and that really is where it was starting to pick up its steam and its pace. And I love the character development in there, and it really started to become, I think, honestly, I believe the more popular division overall. Now I have no empirical facts to back that up. But for me, I never ever missed a live drop of an Innergeekdom match. Ever. I might catch up with the singles. Teams, I never watched Star Wars. Sorry guys. I'm bad at it. I'm so bad at it. But it was entertaining, it was joyful, it was challenging, it was right at that level, and it made you want to go back and watch these movies more.
Absolutely. And just to expand on that point a little about the middle years, and I think this is maybe a point that we don't think about a lot. Maybe the greatest storyline of all time is the corruption storyline, in my opinion. The corruption storyline, in my opinion, took the Schmoedown to another level when it came and made a lot of people who, at least it was a storyline that made me buy into the character stuff, the wrestling aspect, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And the core part of that storyline, and you can argue a big part, especially early on, is the IG division. Because part of the reason Mike does this power control is his reasoning was, well, IG doesn't have its own tournament. We're stuck doing all these 5 ways and 4 ways, and like, no, we're getting one-on-one matches. We're going to have a tournament, and we're going to make this IG division a staple in the Schmoedown. And by the way, he was 100% right on every single point. I think me and Adelia have covered this a couple times. We're not a huge fan of 5 ways or 4 ways. They're not a great way, in my opinion. You can have them every once in a while. They're not a great type of match compared to a regular Schmoedown match. And the problem with IG early on wasn't even, in my opinion, the question difficulty. There were way too many 5 ways deciding huge matches. The championship match for Robert Meyer Burnett one was a 5 way. I think there were a couple number one contender matches that was a 5 way or close to a 5 way or something like that. And by IG being so steeped into what I think is the greatest storyline of all time within the Schmoedown, which is the corruption storyline. And by the way, that storyline was built around being like Mike Kalinowski saying, I know what's best for the IG division, and what's best for the IG division is a tournament. And then, funny enough, the tournament happens, and we get one of the most beloved superstars, the rookie sensations, Mara Kanopik. We get the Mike versus Rate. We get Mike Kalinowski and Rachel Cushing, both also, by the way, getting some wins because before this they had losing records in IG, both of them because they were in five ways, and they kind of got in five ways also very tough in my opinion to like they're very unlucky. There's a lot more luck based. I feel like in five ways versus like a one-on-one match. So, like I think what really when we go to the origins of what made the IG division what it is today, we have to look at the corruption storyline, that tournament, and just how steeped into it and the changes they made that made it work so well, in my opinion.
I agree completely. And that tournament that is the result of the corruption storyline is where it. Oh no, Josh. Is where it completely turned around for the IG division. I think as being taken seriously as one of the premier divisions in the Schmoedown because when it's just every match is a fatal 5-way or every match is a fatal 4-way. Here, Josh is back. It's hard to not necessarily hard to take the competitor seriously, but the format was different than if you had like a one-on-one match in Schmoedown because they wouldn't get as many questions in the wheel round because there was 5 competitors to get through and all of this stuff. So once we got this tournament and we had a one-on-one matchup in every match, and then we had Mara Kanopik go all the way to the final and beat Rachel Cushing along the way and face off against Mike Kalinowski and beat Mike Kalinowski and then win that belt and become the first female individual champion in the Schmoedown. The Shire Wolves obviously the first with the team's belts, but Mara was the first individual female to hold a belt in the Schmoedown. And that tournament run for me was the greatest tournament run of all time until Adam Collins came around. Because you didn't expect it out of Mara. Nobody knew anything about Mara. She didn't play a match before that tournament. She just came in, called herself the Brown Dwarf Star, and just like completely like ignored Kalinowski's whole like attempt at mind games in all the cutscenes and just seemed like super cool and could answer all these questions and like was doing it like injured or hurt or whatever that was going on with Mara in that sick game with Rachel Cushing. And I just really love that tournament. That tournament I will go back and watch consistently when I want to watch Schmoedown matches because there were fantastic matches in that tournament. There were also some blowouts, but there were fantastic matches in that tournament. So, Chris, what do you think of the first Innergeekdom tournament as a whole?
It was enjoyable to watch. That sick match was sick. Yeah. Like, and it wouldn't end. Like, it just kept going, and you could tell both the girls were sitting there going, "Come on already!"
I can still remember the question it ended on, because you could see in Rachel's head that she could not remember the answer to it.
I would not be surprised that day if it ended and you're a winner. They dealt with that, and both girls go off stage and go, ugh, and then they're like, all right, let's give them a few minutes, and then they come back and film the rest. Like, it was that bad. You could see it, but it also made for good television. This is something that is really interesting to me too, is that Mara and Rachel are not real kayfabe people.
No,
they're not. Just them playing was them playing. I really enjoyed the genuineness and the authenticity. They're the only two that I can really think in that division that are really like that. Everyone else kind of had a kayfabe thing going. Everyone did, except those two. But we love them. We love them. They still went at it, and they are amazing players. It just is what it is, and I love watching them, and I always rooted for them. There were sometimes even in my training working with Riley where I got to have Dan and Mara on with us training, and Mara is such a joy to work with. I didn't get to work with her enough because of course she took her breaks, and I totally understand that and get that. But she was always genuine. always real. It wasn't about I'm gonna mess you up. I'm gonna, it wasn't about any of that. It was just I'm here to answer the questions. I worked really hard and I did it great. And it felt very Rocky-ish, I would say. There wasn't a lot of bravado. It was just I'm gonna go in and do my thing. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
so that tournament, that's what that was to me. And knocking Mike down a peg or two always made me happy.
Absolutely, and just to we had like well, what watching Mara and Rachel was so great is it wasn't yes they weren't kayfabe people, but that goes to the other part of the Schmoedown. Half of the Schmoedown was kayfabe, half of the Schmoedown was watching athletes being like, oh my god, I cannot believe they're this good at this tech category or this division and so on. And what was great about the Innergeekdom division is you had Mara and Rachel who were both awesome IG players and like you marvel at them. But you also had, by the way, on the opposite side, some of the best character work in the league with Chandru, with Mike, with Smets. And what I'll quickly say about Smets is I think he reined in. If we're talking about the first explosion of IG being the first Innergeekdom tournament, and then we had a great Mike and Rachel rivalry, which is one of the greatest rivalries of all time. And then I think the next explosion of what made IG truly everyone's favorite division was Kevin Smets. And Kevin Smets immediately coming into IG and just being an awesome character with the hoodie, but also being just marvel to watch. And then you cannot write it more perfectly for him to play Mike Kalinowski for the number one contendership shot, and for him to write down or say, "Don't tell Peter." And you could just see it because anyone who's watched a movie is like, wait, don't tell Peter, he's talking to Peter. And you could just
Peter,
that
yeah.
storybook moment in a
Don't tell
way.
Harry.
Like and then for him to go work his way up, win.
Oh no. Josh is obviously having some internet issues or something. But no, he's absolutely right. We'll get him to finish his thought when he comes back.
Yeah, Smets
Um,
is a very middle ground for me because I actually didn't find Smets to have as much character, but that's not a bad thing here. That's not what I mean at all.
yeah,
Because he kind of let the angry hoodie guy speak, but he didn't talk a lot. When he did, it was, a little bit gruff, a little bit angry, but a lot of times he would let his manager do the talking. And I really
yeah,
appreciate that. But what it came down to, especially after Smets's real life problems, that I'm so happy for him. I still get really excited for him when he gives his updates, and he's
yeah,
regularly gives his updates. The fact is, when he came back, and we watched him come back. We watched it
yeah.
live.
Yep, we watched it live.
I was
Chris, I
so
wasn't
happy.
in the audience. I was sitting back behind the curtain, and I saw him come,
I don't
and I was like, "Oh, Smets is coming back," before
listen.
anybody
Listen,
else
this
knew.
makes me saying I'm in the front row feel so jealous now.
No, Josh, you want to finish your point from before you got disconnected?
Yeah, sorry. I will fix this internet thing at some point. I've been trying a bunch of different things. I promise, guys, I'm working behind the scenes to fix this. But Smets, I would make the argument as a rookie, Smets had one of the most impactful rookie debuts on his division than anyone in the history of
Yes.
the Schmoedown. He was immediately a fan favorite. Him and Kaiser were awesome, and like to have him and Kalinowski, and also someone who doesn't get talked about enough because it was more in the faction era, Chandru. Chandru's heel turn was one of the biggest Schmoedown storylines slash events
Yeah.
within the faction era. It was one of the most interesting as well because he came out as a face and he was really trying hard with the face work. And the funny thing is,
And nobody
despite
liked him.
nobody bought it.
Oh, I
Nobody
hate it.
bought it.
Hate it. Now, again, I have to separate. I've met Chandru the man. He's a
Chandru's a
sweet,
great guy. He's a
Yes.
sweet,
great
sweet,
guy.
kind guy. But when he steps on stage, I want to cuss him out and strangle him.
And like we're going to have a very episode very soon, which is going to be top five heels.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have maybe probably a couple Inner Geekdom players in the top five heels debate. And Chandru, I'll say on my list, is definitely going to be up there. He is like, he also, in like, the top of the IG players had some of the most interesting storylines, face work, heel work. everything and was the easiest players to have both your favorite and maybe least favorite players, and even some of the middle players who didn't end up winning it all. Like one of my favorite players went during the Schmoedown run was Brandon Hanna. I really like the Brandon Hanna stuff, and I might have been one of the only people because, but
Yeah.
I really appreciate the work Brandon Hanna did and some of the storylines that came from Brandon Hanna. We mentioned Adam Hlavik when he played Hector Navarro. Very, very solid player who just wasn't as good as the top, like didn't reach the Smets, Kalinowski, Cushing, Mara, Robert Parker level yet.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I want to quickly mention, there's a reason why we say that maybe a lot of people like Innergeekdom is because now a bunch of at the end of Innergeekdom, a bunch of singles and teams players were constantly rumored into going into Innergeekdom. Chance went into Innergeekdom. Ethan Irwin had an Innergeekdom match. Paul Oyama had an Innergeekdom match. Dan Murrell every season said he was about to go to Innergeekdom, but he said it's funny. He said that like, listen, if I'm going to do this, I have to do this right, and I have to spend the time, and I'm not going to half-ass it, and that's how much respect and also how much people love the Innergeekdom division.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Inner Geekdom also a division blessed with Rachel and Mara, two phenomenal female champions in the Schmoedown, the only two female IG champions, and Rachel, the only ever double belted female champion because she had the team's belt and the IG belt at the same time. They were involved in some of the greatest matches that we ever saw in Inner Geekdom. The one against them, the sick game, of course, the Cushing Kalinowski match when Rachel won the belt at that Schmoedown Throwdown or whatever it was called. 31-30 in sudden death, I believe, is what it was. And then Mara, winning the belt off
Inman.
of Inman, losing it to Kalinowski, going away for a while, coming back, getting that match against Chandru, and winning the belt again. Like it just showed that even time away from the Schmoedown didn't mean that she wasn't still capable. And as a woman, I really looked up to the two of them and thought they were amongst the reasons why women in the Schmoedown needed to be taken more seriously, and all the people that were always in the chat saying, "Oh, there should be a women's league," drove me insane, because like these two women could compete. Lots of the women in the Schmoedown, all of the women in the Schmoedown could compete with the men. They wouldn't have been there if they weren't. So I think that having this division be the only division that had two female champions, because Rachel and Clark individually were a team that won the team's belt, but no other team with a woman in it ever won the team's belt. And then Marisol McKee's the only ever female singles champion.
Mhm.
And I don't believe we ever had a female Star Wars champion.
Mm-mm.
No,
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 we
we did.
didn't.
We got close a couple times
So
with
we
Nikki
got close with Nikki.
and
Yeah, a couple
Laura.
times, Laura. But this this plays into the thing too, that like the nerd culture, the geek culture, whatever you want to call it, isn't just for men. Women can
Mhm.
love this stuff too, and that, as someone who always has, that meant a lot to me to see in the Schmoedown. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? Chris, let's start with you.
Having two daughters, we're a geek family. This just is what it is.
Yeah.
And my daughters always took to a few different people. Emma Fife was the first. In fact, my oldest daughter designed a T-shirt that said "Fife for Life," and we actually sold it on TeePublic for a little while. It's still there if people want to
Nice.
find it. Just say it. But in fact, I can't remember Chris Doman. I sent him a shirt to actually give to her at a spectacular pre. I think it was pre 2020. But my kids loved her, Emma Fife, and then it's Mara and Rachel every single time, and they're so kind and genuine and generous with their knowledge and their energies. And I think they're not just a good example for young ladies. I think they're a good example, period. And that's something we need a lot of in this world. I know this is movie trivia. This is not world-changing stuff. But
Yeah.
to my little girls, for those moments, those were people they trusted, they looked up to, they were excited to see. They get excited that when they win, they get sad when they lose. My kids weren't doing that with Mike Kalinowski. They weren't doing that with Chandru. They weren't doing it with Smets. I was doing it with Smets, but they weren't. So they are so important to this league. 100%. And they showed that women could compete, bar none, period. And it opens up the way for your Nikki's and, for others, and eventually for Marisol. I was so excited for Marisol to win. Absolutely. She slayed it. 100%.
Absolutely. I mean, you both said it great. I'm not sure how much I could add to that, but they were both inspirations and great competitors to root for and watch knowledge wise. I always am a little sad that Rachel never won singles because she was so close. This is maybe a bad joke, but I've always blamed Sam Levine for the fact it took so long because he beat both Clark Wolf and Rachel Cushing in singles championship, and both in sudden death. By the way, it's like you couldn't just give up one question, Sam. Yeah, but Sam's of course obviously great, and that's why he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest player of all time, is how he was able to do that. But yeah, Rachel and Mara, before Smets came along, really the IG legends were Mike, Rachel, and Mara. Those were the three, and it was majority women for the most part. Like when it came to the new era of IG, I consider a new era past basically Jason Inman. And I think Jason Inman, maybe if he was a very knowledgeable person who probably, if he studied, probably would have been able to maybe hang. He was like the first kind of like wave of the somewhat new champion. But then I think Mike, Rachel, and Mara were the new wave in that sense. And I think that like when you thought of the top of the IG, the two of the three names.
This always happens with poor Josh. He'll be back. I think that we had a good variety of champions in the Innergeekdom division. I think they definitely represented a bunch of different ways that you could win the IG belt, whether it was pure knowledge in the beginning or studying hard at the end. Josh is back.
I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's happening with my internet today.
It's okay.
In this league too, what I really appreciate, there is not one competitor who is just overly dominating. There is not one competitor I would call the GOAT of IG.
Yeah.
Mike is probably up there just because of how many times he was able to do it.
I mean, like, okay, for example, I look at Rachel's Innergeekdom record. Guys, she was 5-4. 5-4 out of 9 matches. That when I look at that, I go, those are not championship numbers. Not in any way. Now, Smets comes close. Smets was 10-3 with a ton of KOs, but I would never call him dominating.
Right.
His scores were never, because if he was dominating, we would see an awful lot more TKOs. To me, that's a dominating player. Is, if I see that you're just beating players out 7, 8 or more points, that's dominating. So we never really saw that in Innergeekdom, which again, any given Sunday, any given competitor could go into this and something could happen. And you mentioned the, don't tell Peter, that moment. Don't tell Peter. Those kinds of mistakes, you get under the lights, you get under the moment, you get in your own head and you think too fast, you write too fast, it happens. And that's what was great about it, is that could lead to a new champion at end point. But I don't think there was any one player in that division who just absolutely crushed it continuously. Everyone had a bad day. It happens. And everyone sometimes had a bad season. Sometimes you had to retire. Sometimes you had to leave. You never know. That's what was enjoyable about this. It's like baseball. You just don't know.
Absolutely. And to add on to your point, Chris, this was a division where there were basically no defenses. If you look back in the history of it. And I cut out.
No, you're here.
Yeah, no, there it goes. Yeah, no, he's absolutely right. There were no defenses. You can't hide in this division.
No. This arguably, to me, was the toughest division in the Schmoedown
I
because
I think Star
everybody.
Wars was tougher. I
But
mean,
no, but I mean like from all the competitors that were at championship level were at a level that they could take it from anyone at any given moment. That's what I mean by that.
I
Star
got you.
Wars was obviously the toughest question wise, but for me, the Innergeekdom division is the toughest competitively because there were just so many top players who were championship caliber.
Absolutely, and I'll quickly add on to that point before I get cut off by the internet trying to silence me. But what I was going to say is that like this is the division that had by far the least defenses. Like
Mhm.
it was almost impossible to defend in IG, and that's why probably Mike Kanowski is considered to go to IG is because he has the most defenses by far. If you think about it, I think like really like off the top of my head, the only people who I can think who have defended are Mike Kalinowski, Hector Navarro, and Jason Inman. I don't think
Successfully.
what
Chandra
successfully.
did,
Successfully.
didn't he?
Oh,
I
Chandru,
think
yes,
Chandra
Chandru,
defended the belt. Yeah.
yes, but yes, and Mike I think is the only one who had multiple defenses for sure. It was a
That
very
sounds
very
right.
tough division to defend. It was and there was a joke for a while that's like that like oh whoever wins, I don't know joke, but like it just felt like whoever won the belt was going to lose to the challenger as soon as they won it.
Mhm.
Absolutely. It was definitely a very very good division. The championship being able to be like just won by anyone at any moment really upped the stakes for me whenever there was a championship match. It was imperative that you tuned in to a championship match in this division because you didn't know who was going to walk out with the belt. And like
Absolutely.
we ended up with 2 3-time champions in this division. Been Kalinowski and Smets by the end of it. Smets being the final Inner Geekdom champion in the Schmoedown. But it doesn't feel like it was just the two of them. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
Mara was a 2-time champion. Rachel won the belt once. Nobody else won the belt more than once. Um,
Chandru did
what
get
do you,
the one belt in defense, same with Inman and Navarro, but Inman and Navarro
yeah,
were a different age, you know.
yeah, different age. What is you guys' thought for what is the greatest IG match of all time?
I will always have a heart for the sick match. That sick match was just I say it's sick. And I will never forget the challenge that was. It just didn't end.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, I still remember the question it ended on, which was, which character said,
I'm
"There's
afraid
only
of
one
knives.
God, ma'am. There's only no. It's there's only one God, ma'am, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that." And Rachel said Superman, and
It's
Mara
Captain
said
America.
Captain America, and it's Captain America.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about because I think there's a different question that ends in a match where it's asking about the Andrew Garfield. My one weakness, not knives, small knives. I'm pretty sure that also decided a match. I thought it was that
I
match.
don't
So
remember. I don't remember which match that is. I remember that, but I don't remember which match it is. But the one that decided Mara and Rachel, the only match we ever got between Mara and Rachel, which is crazy to think about,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
was that question.
I go back and forth between and you can say any of the Mike versus Rachel championship matches. But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, the "Don't Tell Peter" moment is so iconic that like that rate, and also the fact that they were both so on point, where I think it was almost like a perfect match going into that question,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the question that ended it. I think I go back depending on the day, but I think for me it's a "Don't Tell Peter" match.
I think for me too, some of the things that I also love, you talked about how you didn't really like the Fatal Five Ways. I really loved when we got Inner Geekdom Exhibition and we'd have four
Those
or
were
five
fun.
players.
Yeah.
Those
Those
see
were
that's what
great.
that's the kind of like format I think that you should do Fatal Four Ways, Fatal Five Ways on was in exhibition stuff. I don't think it should have been like actual league matches, but exhibition stuff. Five people like sitting around the table trying to answer all the Harry Potter questions or the Star Trek questions or whatever. That was great. I loved those.
It took me
Absolutely.
years to understand, by the way, the Harry Potter match, why John Roca was there.
He was there because he worked at
So
Harry Potter World.
no, that's the funny story to it. I questioned it for years, and then I was strolling through YouTube one day, and I love watching theme park stuff because I'm too fat to ride the rides.
Mhm.
So I watch all the run throughs and stuff, and I'm watching that, and I go, I know that voice. Why do I know that voice? And I'm watching, I'm like, that's the Outlaw. Is that John Roca? And I was like, that's John Roca. So
Yeah.
little things like that. But that's the joy of this. There wasn't a lot of pressure to these.
Mhm.
And
The
yet it
exhibition
was,
matches, you mean, or in
yeah,
IG
yeah,
in
the
total?
exhibition. No, IG was extremely competitive. I
Yeah.
will never say there was an easy match. Not once was there ever an easy match to go through. And I know we have less matches than singles, but I would dare say that statistically, again, you didn't have a massive number of blowouts that were going on. I would have to dig through and find out how many TKOs there were total, but I don't think there were as many as we ever saw in like
I think
singles.
there definitely had to have been more in singles,
Especially at the
just by
top
the sheer
level.
volume of matches.
Especially at the top level, because it felt like if you got to a number one contender match, you were at a certain point. That is, after like a certain point, if you got to a number one contender match or you got to a championship match, you're not getting TKO normally. In fact, the one TKO I think I can remember is didn't Chandru TKO Smets? Wasn't that a TKO or did Chandru win to
I
one
don't
touch?
remember if that was a TKO. I know it wasn't a knockout because it made it to the fifth round, but I
Chandru?
don't remember if it was a
Yeah, was
TKO.
Chandru versus Smets a TKO? I think it might have been.
I'll look it up. I'll look it up.
I'm looking it up right now. Yeah,
I could be wrong. Maybe I'm misremembering, but
Chandru Dandapani. One of my favorite names just to say, by the way. Just like
I may be wrong, but I
There we
remember
go.
that final match.
Chandru win by TKO against Jared. Win by TKO against Brandon Hanna.
No, he didn't. He didn't
Okay.
TKO Smets. He didn't.
Got it.
Yeah, no.
Got it. I remember that being like I think Chandru had a good lead on Smets heading into that final match in some way.
Let's see, what was the final score of that match? It was 35-33.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. I might be misremembering it.
Yeah.
Man, were those great.
But yeah, lots of really great stuff in the Innergeekdom division, and just a fantastic division all around. We're almost an hour, guys, so let's start to wrap it up here. Chris, any final thoughts?
I really I love the Schmoedown in every aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
I would love a revival, even if they just as a special thing brought back singles or like that. But it's Innergeekdom that gives me always that hope that like let's see an Innergeekdom match again. Come on, I want to see that because I want to play, and I don't mean I don't want to be on the screen.
You want to play along.
I want to play along. That's where I felt like it was meant for me. This is what was meant for me because I'm a nerd, because I'm a geek. And I was like, I could do this. I wasn't great at writing Innergeekdom questions. I'll tell you that now. I was better at writing for singles and teams. But I miss it. This was the joy to watch. This is what I got excited for all the time. And these are some of the matches that I remember vividly.
Absolutely. I'll just quickly add on that. Like when I watched IG, and I think a lot of people had this moment with IG, there was always one category where it's like, man, I hope it lands on that because I can answer some questions and play along. For me, that was like the superhero movies for the most part, but like for some people that was Pirates of the Caribbean or Jurassic Park or Middle Earth or Star Trek, but everyone had that one category. You saw it on the wheel and you're like, yes, come on, spin on it. Come on, spin on it. I want to answer some. I want to at least be able to play along a little. And I think that was some of the magic of it is that like even if you weren't the all-rounded player in IG, that these champions were. Everyone had one category, and I think everyone in general has one category in their minds that they can be a Schmoedown champion if there was a division in that, whether it's MCU, Star Trek, something like that. This isn't a movie one, but my personal one would be One Piece. If there was a One Piece Schmoedown, I think I would eat
It's
that up.
I'm with you 100%. As a matter of fact, like I know we're ending. Really, really short story. When I went to Spectacular, I did the early thing where we went downstairs and hung out and all that cool stuff. Well, they were doing trivia stuff throughout the whole time that we were there, like 2 hours or so, whatever it was. And I got to compete, and I won on a Lord of the Rings question, which was so cool to me. And I think it was like what is the name of the city or the city of men in Gondor or something like that. And I got it right, and I got to choose mine. And the wedge that I got, I could have picked any wedge I wanted. I wanted the Innergeekdom Star Wars wedge. It's sitting on my wall still to this day. That wedge, and it's because.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm again with you on the same thing. Like, I want to see the things that I love and I want to answer them, and it's pure joy, and also not feeling like we're some outcasts. I think that's an aspect of it we don't talk about a lot. In the Schmoedown in general, made watching movies and talking about them cool. And so Inner Geekdom, when it's a little more specific, and for some people Star Wars, even more, a little more specific, you don't feel ridiculous talking about, hey, do you know about Rhoda the Hutt? You don't feel ridiculous about it. Hey, did you hear what kind of wand Harry had? It's like that kind of stuff. We loved talking about that, and we build friendships over those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I just realized I never gave my favorite Innergeekdom match of all time. The sick game is up there for sure, but my favorite is the one where Rachel won the belt for the first time, the sudden death match with Mike Kalinowski. Just for all of the drama, Rachel was really far ahead, and then Kalinowski reeled her in, and then went to sudden death. I love that match.
Was that the one when she came to dress as Galadriel?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember her dressed as Galadriel in that match.
I don't remember which one it was, but I remember her coming in at one time.
Her entrance as Galadriel, amazing. I say this is the biggest Lord of the Rings nerd I know, except for maybe the French Totter, who might be a little bit more.
Hey, you've gone toe to toe with Marisol McKee, is all I can say. And he died. I forget. Didn't you win that? Didn't you win that match?
I won that. We're talking about the Video Chronic quiz that Video Drew and Nerd Chronic used to do. I did take on Marisol McKee and Brennan Marr in the Lord of the Rings quiz, and I did win that one. Yes,
nice.
And Marisol sent me the nicest message after that, telling me that she loves seeing nerd ladies who know their stuff.
I will have to say that was so much fun to write. It's so much fun, but the fact that she knew the final question off the top of her head, and I will tell you, if you remember what it was, how many beacons did Gondor light? And we had to count what was seen on screen. And she was sitting there, I'm watching her looking up and just side to side.
She was figuring it out.
She got the number right. And I was like,
when she got that number right, Chris, I thought she'd won. I did the math wrong in my head because I was like, I'm going to say 10. I know that's wrong. But I thought she'd won when she said her answer, and she had not, according to you.
We should go back and watch that again just for memories.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyways, I loved this division. I loved everything about it, and I've had a great time talking about it today with you guys. Put your thoughts on the Innergeekdom division down below in the comments. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. We're going to have a bunch of episodes of This Was the Schmoedown coming out for the rest of the year, even though they won't be live because I'm about to have spinal fusion surgery. So, but we're going to pre-record them just for you guys. So definitely be on the lookout for those, one a month for the rest of the year. Appreciate everyone for being here, and we'll see you next time.